This program is part of Lift Every Voice, Why African American Poetry Matters, a national public humanities initiative of Library of America presented in partnership with the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, with generous support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and Emerson Collective. Hello everyone, welcome again to Black Poetry Fest, a series of virtual programming brought to you by Fulton County and Lift Every Voice, a program by Library of Americas. So today we're going to speak with Dustin Pearson, but we're going to start with a poem from African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song, edited by Kevin Young. And this book also will be available for checkout in the Fulton County Library System, so be on the lookout for that as well. Today we're going to read Carolyn Rogers' How I Got Over. I can tell you about them. I have shaken rivers out of my eyes. I have waded eyelash deep, have crossed rivers, have shaken the water weed out of my lungs, have swam for strength, pulled by strength, through waterfalls with electric beats. I have bore the shocks of water, deep, deep waterlogs are my bones. I have shaken the water free of my hair, have kneeled on the banks, and kissed my ancestors of the dirt, whose rich, dark root fingers rose up, reached out, grabbed and pulled me, rocked me, cupped me, gentle, strong, and firm, carried me, made me swim for strength, cross rivers, though I shivered, was wet, was cold, and wanted to sink down and float as water. Yeah, I can tell you, I have shaken rivers out of my eyes. So in this poem, Carolyn Rogers tells the story of how the poet got over. Rogers' mode of storytelling here is close to that of myth-making. She becomes a hyperbolic figure of strength and great interior power. Today's featured poet, Dustin, also recounts small moments, feelings of Black family, and the emotional dynamics of a community, with rich layers full of history, empathy, and clarity. I hope you enjoy our conversation with Dustin, and we'll see you on the other side. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Dustin Pearson. To begin the Black Poetry Fest, I'm going to read his intro, and then we're going to hear some poems. Dustin Pearson is the author of A Season in Hell with Rimbaud, Millennial Roost, and A Family is a House. He is a McKnight Doctoral Fellow in Creative Writing at Florida State University, the recipient of fellowships from Cave Canem, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing, and the Anderson Center at Tower View. Pearson has served as the editor of Hayden's Ferry Review and a director of the Clemson Literary Festival. He won the Academy of American Poets Catherine C. Turner Prize and John McKay Graduate Award, and holds an MFA from Arizona State University. The recipient of a 2021 Pushcart Prize, his work also appears or is forthcoming in The Nation, Poetry Northwest, Blackbird, Vinyl Poetry, Bennington Review, Tri-Quarterly, Pank, The Literary Review, Poetry Daily, Hayden's Fair Review, and elsewhere. Dustin's poems show us the consequences of closeness, how the events of our lives trickle into one another, that small moments matter. They ripple through our whole being. Dustin's work demonstrates how our actions make a difference to those in our community and the possibilities of what we could mean to each other. All right, Dustin, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I thought I would just read a few poems from my second book, A Family's a House, and then preview the forthcoming book, A Season in Hell with Rimbaud, since we're talking about family today. So this first poem It's called Falling Out Our Father's Mouth. Of course, it's in part a good thing. Everything inside it is a weapon. It's hot, cramped. We sit in its open sores and look outward. At night, his mouth eats. It talks and leaves us out of it. Hangs open for the salted rims of glasses, the liquid contents, the pull and sigh of smoke. His tongue strains, meeting the pink point of foreign tongues as if in a blind slither to nowhere, while us boys dodge them both. In the corner, we listen to the smacking of lips, watch both junctures peel, part, and join again on the bed. Mouth wide open to the ceiling before folds of brown and pink flesh eclipse us. We hold on tightly as everything unsteadies. The stars and the sky shrink. Planets shift. And this cave we've entered in after him starts to sour again. Those vapors he takes in over us. We've come so far for our father, but where are we? The only name spoken is his own. This poem's called Love the Ugly. Our mother's hair fell sharp as razor wire. Her hands morphed to talons, her smell wet iron, and for a while, every touch she gave was a cut on us. Every kiss sent toxins into her veins. We could hear how her bones snapped, see smoke exit at each of their breakings, and all through the night we heard her screams. Every story told a curse, making each of us its container. Doing this back and forth motion between mother and father poems. Mother and father poems. This next poem is called The Last Time We Saw Our Dad's Face. He sat locked out of the house in the driveway. We watched from the curtain, thinking how we'd never sat on his chest, never twirled our fingers through his hair. We're never close enough to the scent of his aftershave, despite his clean and sunken face. There was something about the wash of the floodlights over him. His eyes glowed golden, lighter than we knew them. His pupils cut sharp like a cat's. I remember this one night walking through the house to get water. The air wet, smelling of salt and iron. Turning the corner into the kitchen, I found him curled dark by the light of a lamp like some 6-foot slug. Had only known him there by the click of the light and him suddenly under it. All those freed shadows digging into him when he saw me and said nothing. I was afraid to walk past, fearing he'd grab me, do something to make me any more scared, and run back to my room parched. I couldn't help but think if I started running, this might be the only time he'd chase after me. I would make it to the room before he did. It would be the one time I could be scared he might break in, his strong arms leaning over. All those moldy shadows dangling toward me from him, with the world being then too small for me to do anything but take them in. Sleeping with grandfather. I remember Mom threading the needle, lashing the stitch back and forth in her hands. Grandfather had just died. We found him dead on the hardwood, skin still vibrant and moist. No time to waste. Mom peeled him in long, shapely strips. then cut them into worthy squares. Grandfather would become a blanket, an otherwise mixed message for us to sleep under. Mom paid a guy $50 to dig a hole to throw him in, and another 20 to cover it up. She sat around the plot making the quilt, and we sat a skirt around her while she told the story of him. Bastard. Always made off on cold nights, paying for warmth he hadn't bothered to find right in front of him. But I promise, she said, you all will have. He won't take that away from you. And it'll kill him, you know, shacking up to benefit his own kin. And she was right. All those years we had him. At bedtime, we'd pull him back from the headboard, tucking ourselves feet first before pulling him over our faces. Okay, and this will be the last poem from this book, and then I'll switch into just like a preview of the new manuscript. Our father's new body. Layers of skin trailed behind its slow movement, dark, gray, wrinkly strips with hard hair like an elephant's. They hit the ground in splashes, as if in a dive to someplace important, but they just squirmed on the ground where they curled, dehydrated, their undersides red-pink with the smell of decay. We went behind them, collecting the pieces in ice water as though we could save them. Between our dad's thin words and departures, we were unsure of where exactly inside the body we could reach in and find him. It helped to look in his eyes. Raw need inside them, but still without welcome or gratitude. What skin remained hung long on him and away from his doings. At night, when he turned over scared from the dreams that chased him, his skin poured from the bed to the floor like vomit. In the mornings, he'd go in on the toilet. No one saw him until noon. We'd send one of us in to clean after him, but it was always as if he never went. Despite it, we still fed him, knowing there are things no son can get away with. Even as our dad's body separated in our hands as we bathed it, the pull of his crevices with raised masses underneath. Us boys look back and agree we must have helped him that little huge bit that was possible. In the last of it, the skin pulled so sharply against his jaw, we swore with it we could cut mountains. Maybe at a certain point we always knew we could remove him, but we wouldn't. Less whatever sadness, it would have been so easy. Our dad, so little in his body and the world, as to slip with one grudge into the next. Okay, so that I think you mentioned already. The title of the new book is called A Season in Hell with Rimbaud, and this is the title poem. I dreamt I was showing my brother around in hell. We started inside the house. Everything was brown besides the white sheets in the bedrooms. I let him look outside the window. Told him it was hottest there, where the flames rolled against the glass, as if a giant mouth were blowing them, as if there were thousands caught in the storm, pushing it onward with mindless running, save a desperation for something else. How had there been a house in hell and we invited with time to spend? Why was it I hadn't questioned how I got there? My brother growing so tired from the heat? The sweating? Surely we could open the door, he said. Surely there'll be a breeze. Even seeing already. Even burning himself on the doorknob. his eyes turned back in his head, working his way to the bedrooms, staining the sheets with his blistered hands. And though I knew the beds weren't for the rest of any body, I sat by and let him sleep. Okay, so this last poem is one I have to read off of my computer. It's called Lying Down. Every body that hits the ground in hell will get back up, should they choose it. There's plenty of death and destruction, but no dead. All ends are artificial, wishful thinking, and even running. Even seeing their soft resolve lie face down, you feel sorry for them. Some bodies are so far decided, and in some areas, they're lying so dense. You try your best not to step on them, but when you do, most times they don't bother to make a sound. They mimic what they remember of the dead things from when they lived. In the crowds of the bodies still making their way, I found myself running over the planks the lying make, stepping on the backs of their charcoaled heads, their heads inducing a misstep as they sink, as I further bury their faces. It's the stress of the flames behind us that causes this, that encourages our rapid collective pacing. It's easy to fall. One falling becomes many, and many makes a felt section. But soon enough, the disturbed tide of running finds a balance, and those of us who have gone under, it seems, for hours are forced to be the fodder of those whose timing is better. I remember watching TV upstairs. Upstairs, the entertainment center held easily the biggest TV in the house. Only with the weight distributed as it was with the TV inside, it was even easier for everything to tumble over. My brother half watched, but mostly browsed at the computer. My feet rested on the lower half of the center, not realizing its rocking as I pushed. I'll admit, I understood badly what it meant to be mad at a person. I thought once it happened, they withdrew from you. You can no longer count on them. And to make things even or protect yourself, you'd also withdraw your protection. My father taught me that. I remember learning the lesson from my brother, but also the day he complicated it. The TV stand began to tip over. Having realized right away I might have been able to escape, but I merely fell back and waited to be crushed. My brother, with one arm, pushed it back. I remember thinking, why would you do that? Had you been waiting for something bad to happen to me, this was your chance. It would have made me sad, but I would have given it to you. Years back, we were both tiny. I remember the same thing happened to him, only no one was there to save him. I can't remember if I watched it happen, but I'd seen its aftermath. My brother flailing under the weight of the thing and crying. I don't believe I would have been strong enough to stop it, but I don't trust the memory or myself inside of it to know I would have had I been. And I thank God for that. I only need to atone for the present. If the only world is a hell with my brother in it, being with him will make a new one. Thank you.
Thank you. That's amazing. That's awesome. I'm really excited for that next collection now.
Thank you.
Yeah, 2022. That's a long wait for me, but I'll. But even that poem goes perfectly into some of the themes I was going to talk about with your older collections, which is how much you're comfortable talking about your family and people around you in your community. Um, and I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how you go about incorporating um, stories, or more importantly, I guess your feelings about people in real life into poems. Um, and I know you like to there's always like an element of myth or exaggeration that might help you through that process. But I was wondering if you could talk about um, what's the word? Some of the things you consider when you start that process.
Yeah, I'd say my main consideration when it comes to, I guess, trying to extract insight from experiences that I've had is to, I guess, so there's this notion of reality, right? This kind of consensus. Like if we were to talk about what we're doing right now, it's like I read some poems and now you're asking questions about them. But I think what happens off screen is how we're internalizing this experience, right? Like I could try to explain to you what this means to me going forward beyond, just like the knowledge that we're, having a kind of conversation. So that's why I use like allegory and these, I guess, like magical elements in my writing to get at things that I've experienced in real life or things based off of things that I've experienced in real life, is because it's all about grasping at that internalized experience, trying to um, get past this lack of satisfaction that I get out of reality.
Mhm.
And so you're talking about like, you said something about like my feelings toward people. I think one of the ways that I get at those feelings and how I privilege them or center them is to route them and explore them in my internalized kind of like world, or a world that's built and kind of that kind of emerges from my internalized experience. So that way I'm talking about my feelings in my own terms and kind of like addressing reality that I've had to get at something more than the actual experience, or how I talk about the actual experience, or how I would outside of poetry has been able to give me.
Yeah. And I also think too, a lot of times uh, that reinterpretation of like internal experience, that can be more true than like a recounting of a literal, like that's where poems can be more true than maybe like a nonfiction or some kind of just recounting what the event was. I guess it's kind of a common question, but I think people have different answers about how they think about, like if you're talking about your parents or I write about my family too, and I don't really have a concern of if they see it, but I'm curious if you do, uh, how that plays out.
Yeah, like I think because I'm working so deeply in internalized experience and in the realm of feelings, it's by the time I've gone through and I've processed that and I've like situated um, these, I guess, feelings or experiences in these like original worlds, I'm not even sure how much they resemble like these actual figures, right? So like when I think about the poems in A Family is a House, like there's so many poems about like siblings, right? There's so many more siblings in A Family is a House than I actually have. And the mother and the father figure, um, I really do see them as figures and how they plug into like, I guess like a Black experience of family.
Yeah.
And because it works so much in the imagination, like there's not a ton of like quotes or anything. It's mostly just working on the image level. So there's I guess like the reality of the world in which those poems emerge. It's more implied rather than explicit. Like I think like my first book is a lot, it's more lyrical.
Hmm.
Um, but even so, like because I'm working with like these kinds of worlds that I create in order to get at these experiences or gain insight into them or explore emotional avenues I didn't actually pursue when I had these experiences. Um, they kind of like plug into persona.
Yeah.
So, and then I guess like there's just like the obscurity of poetry to a certain extent. Like my mom has read my poetry, and it's like I don't even think like she hasn't said anything to me about like recognizing herself in the poems. So
Yeah.
it's like I just think um I don't know if I'm consciously trying to render her in poems, but like even she like reads the poems and she's like, oh yeah, the mother in that book. that
Yeah,
kind of.
it's like there's a mother. Yeah, the mother. Uh, and I wonder if you could go more about I especially feel for Black poets, like when I write about like a father experience, uh, and it's not always like factual, it's just again more going on the feeling of the experience. I sometimes feel like we have a responsibility of like representing, if it is bigger than just the experience is bigger than just my relationship with my father. I'm talking about like the Black relationship with the Black father. Um, how do you think about that responsibility, or is that something that um, obviously occurs to you? But
Yeah, I think, do I see it as a responsibility? Um,
but more so, you were talking about, you said like the Black experience, um, like when you read about family, that's different. I don't know. I feel like it's talking
yeah,
about a family now, you know?
yeah, like I think, Finlay's house being something like I wanted intentionally to like emerge out of like the Black experience. And that's informed by, like other people that I know, experience of like a nuclear family, um, and some of the beauties and the dysfunctionalities of that. So it's like I think people can, I don't know, they're not like archetypes because obviously like, I'm putting like some of my experience into it, especially working through like image and having everything be imagery. Like I'm sure that people can recognize the father in the family as a house, just like the colossal amount of respect that's assigned to Black fathers as like figureheads, and like the kind of like, I don't know, the like incredible respect they get, regardless of what their conduct is toward the family. Like I think about like how I internalize the the figure of a Black father, but also like routing that through these emotions, right? Concretizing like emotions that are specific to experiences that I've had, and those two kind of things kind of blend together, and something that feels really true, but
Yeah,
also estranges the rendering of the poems from being exclusively like my emotions, or exclusively this representation of what these figures in a Black family are.
yeah. Um, yeah, I agree with all that. And I hope I don't seem like I'm trying to conflate them too much, but I just want you to like, I like talking about that so people who hear how Black poets are thinking about these things, like we know that it's not, we're not giving a one-to-one relationship. We're not giving something strictly personal either. It's this like other thing that we can do from this like um, almost like marginalized position, right? So that if we're trying to um, show experience, we're aware that there's a majority that has no way to relate to that other than us giving these poems. So that's why I asked that. Um, I'm also, when you talked about autobiography once from Life as or A Family as a House, you said like marginalized voices, uh, people feel like they could ask anything about them. I think it's on the same train of thought. And you mentioned it briefly, but I would love if you could explain what that means, that marginalized voices are asked a lot, are put on a lot for their work. And I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, I think like one of the tendencies of like the larger literary world when they encounter a marginalized voice is to take it as representative,
Mhm.
um, as if like the whole of experiences from a marginalized positionality can be represented by one person. So I think that that is, I don't know, it's very strange, but it does happen a lot. And when thinking about like poems like autobiography, like I don't know, like these wolves running around and eating bacon, it's just like absurd, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the tension of titling a poem autobiography, and then it operating out of like fantasy, this fantastical situation, and even if it doesn't cohere in some kind of I guess like literal sense that people can discern, like that poem has a very real correspondence with that my emotionality or like my personhood. So I think I like just scrambling all of these notions that like, oh, it's like, it has something to say to that tendency of people to make me representative and I don't know, to filter the poems that I write in autobiography and the fact that, I'm not a wolf. And I don't know, I don't have the ability to like throw up my heart and then swallow it, then still be alive. So like,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like that is so something about the rendering is so foundational to how I see the experience of family. And you just have to, I guess, like you have to go beyond a superficial engagement to understand that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I'd say your the last poem you read, A Season in Hell with Rimbaud, felt like a reverse of that. So the title is like clearly like absurdist, but the poem's going through what feels like very tangible emotions. Like we see you working through something very real, but the premise starts with like something not based in, maybe not based in reality as far as, yeah, you're not in hell right now. You didn't spend a season in hell with Rimbaud, like they don't think that happened. So, yeah, so it's like the opposite kind of setup. So you use that to kind of think about what you're, I guess, giving people. And I
Right.
like that from marginalized voices too, that to consider that as a device um, to speak about real things. Even I'd say your first book with Mr. Hin, using like the conceit of like correspondence to talk about real things. I don't know if you could talk about that, like using that distance. I guess if you think about your first book, using that distance of correspondence, talking to this fictional character to process real things. If you could just briefly touch.
Yeah. So like with Millennial Roost, it being like epistolary and all these letters, enacting a correspondence between an abused party and then his abuser, right? Like in order to, get beyond, I guess, like it just being that, like literature enables all of these possibilities and ambiguities to exceed like its subject matter. So like with this absurd premise that this abuser could be an eggling rooster, which is like, I don't know, like anatomically impossible. Um, it allows me to have that figure represent the abuse too, right? So I can speak to the article condition and the treatments of people who have, or the treatment of people, no matter what their position is to that abuse, whether they're complicit somehow, whether they're the abused party, whether they are an abuser, like that vehicle, that device in that book allows me to speak to all of those positionalities or implicate people who have different relationships to it. So there's not a way in which like you're reading that book and you can be like, okay, well, I'm not an abused person, so I can just ignore this, right? I think it's a way to bring people in no matter what their relationship is to this abuse and or this happening and gain something from it or have a very personal emotional kind of reaction to it. It just opens up the experience and allows insight to be um, drawn from it, and people to engage critically with that subject matter that I guess typically wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that was such like that's the big one of the big successes of that project was you can't leave that book without feeling some part like you're some part of this you're being spoken to uh, from some position or another, and then sometimes you can feel yourself on both sides. You're a part of all of this as a reader. There's never a point where you're like only observing and not being spoken to. uh, yeah, but that epistolary form helps with that a lot. I love that book.
Thank you.
I kind of on that book, and I'm not asking everybody, but I'm going to ask you because you talk about touch and points of connection and intimacy so much. Uh, how's your writing experience been since quarantine? So I know that's like a not the funnest question, but uh, I think with you it would be interesting to think about how you're work is responding to that?
Yeah. So, yeah, and I haven't even thought about that until like now, because if you think about Millennial Ruse specifically, like this person or this speaker is writing, I don't know, kind of like to this world and to the world and to no one in particular, right? Kind of like writing in a sense of isolation, um, having like this kind of like radical optimism in a way, like externalizing this and reaching out, right? And really not being able to get an answer from an abuser or get an answer from anybody who encounters the work, but kind of like hoping that there will be some kind of positive kind of like response back. I think in quarantine and the isolation of now, my experience of writing, um, I've tried writing new things, um, but I think what has saved me from, I guess, like being discouraged or like feeling strongly about like what I have or haven't been able to accomplish
Mhm.
is having the forthcoming manuscript.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of like reflecting and I guess like revising, preparing for publication. But I think like I've been using this time to acquire new skill sets and trying to reorient myself to my art. And so I've been making GIFs.
I didn't know how to get there, but I really wanted to ask you. I know you're working like on Instagram. What are you doing?
I on Twitter because I don't know. This is just my way of like coping with I guess like the isolation that I feel on social media. I feel like certain people's their personalities they bloom on social media, but me it's like me being earnest, being the weirdo that I am. It's like I just do what I do on social media and just like I don't know who's listening or who's watching or like what kind of like correspondence I expect or what my expectations from it there. Just being somebody who I don't think has a personality to thrive there. So I was to getting over that and still being present, just to let people know, hey, I'm still here, even though I'm not popular here. I would post GIFs. But one of my teachers, like she would see the GIFs that I would post on social media. And one day she just was like, Dustin, you can make your own GIFs. And I was like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
And then long story short, I started engaging with them. And I guess like similar to like picking up poetry as a craft, like when I first started, like I started developing, I guess like an artistry for it and like uh, artistic ambitions within that form. So most of my GIFs were like photography based, and I'm trying to, I guess, like develop a different relationship to the image and thinking about how cinematic I feel like my work has become lately. So the GIFs are a really nice outlet for that. Like, and you could kind of say that like my artistic progression has charted like my different like my changing emotions over the course of this quarantine because when I first started I was making gifs that were very cinematic. They were almost like movies, vignettes of movies. And now recently I've been posting gifs that have been full of color and
Right.
movement and not really like filled with people or trying to create narratives or anything.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's maybe you could say that it was sensational, but I think I see it as a way of trying to, I don't know, keep myself emotionally um, occupied, but also in a positive space rather than spiraling to,
Right.
um, yeah, spiraling.
Yeah. When you said outlet, I see a lot of artists either picking up a different craft or just like if we like we just need another way to express. And for you to put that on social media too, how you said like it's a space where you don't have any expectations going into it of viewership. Uh, I imagine that's freeing, but I like to see the development and what you're thinking about. Um, and it doesn't even seem that it's like it's not related to current events. It's just you with a space to make these things. Um, and there just seems something like very like pure about it. And um, you could see your curiosity in the process. uh, and you exploring ideas um, outside of um, your work. I like you said that you're thinking about like you were thinking about like cinematic gifts in relation to your poetry, and now it's more it's kind of shifting. But it's just really exciting to watch. So I keep it up. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but I'm so curious of what you were up to. So
No,
that's
thank you. I love it when people are when I find out that people have been taking note of the GIFs and they enjoy them. It makes me really, really happy because most of the time I just post them out there and then I wonder how people are like receiving it and like, why does he keep posting these GIFs? And I feel like I was talking with a friend once and he was like, I didn't even know you were making those yourself.
mm.
And I was just like, yeah, pretty much. It's like, how do I signal that I make the GIFs that I make myself? So I started giving them titles similar to poems, but I don't think that that necessarily cues people in that I'm making them myself either. So I don't know. It's like a process that I'm still going through and it's helping my poetry, but also it's like something that I, not just something that I picked up for now, it's something that I'm going to go forward with. So I'm very happy to have it.
Cool. Um, I have a couple more questions. I'm looking at time. I think we're okay. Uh, as an academic, so you obviously have tons of degrees and everywhere. You are involved in a lot of poetry communities. I met you through Cave Canem. I know that some communities, so Cave Canem centers Blackness and poetry. And then like I did my own MFA. Other communities just center around poetry. Can you talk about some of the challenges between being in a community that centers Blackness and poetry versus some other poetry communities? Maybe challenges or differences. Um,
Right. So yeah, like I think there is like a really intense compartmentalization that happens sometimes, going between these different spaces, right? So they're like some spaces that are exclusively centered around Blackness and poetry. Some of them are multi-genre. Some of them are for like people of color as like, this band of marginalized communities that we're trying to bring together. Um, in the academy, it's something completely different where, Blackness is not centered, maybe never centered. And so being someone who who's a part of the academy and centers Blackness, like inevitably in some ways, right, like having to deal with the kind of I guess negotiation of that or the exchange of that, like you're bringing Blackness to this space that doesn't center Blackness and having to, I guess, convince like these spaces that it's important. I don't know, how do I deal with it or process them. I guess I would say like it's the compartmentalization, right? And I like the intersections that I'm able to um, make.
Mhm.
Like another one of the organizations that I am a part of is the Watering Hole, which is another person of color organization based in the South. And I love that. I love being the Southern kid um, who gets to, I guess, like celebrate Southernness and Blackness, and I don't know, just everything, all the complications of those. Like I think like people, Southernness is one of those things that people picture very specifically. Um, um, I don't know. I just had this chaotic thing of be like, everybody picture Mississippi right now. What are you seeing?
That's
But I think what people leave out, like the way that I'm thinking about Southernness now is specifically those West African and Native American influences that inform, uh, you know, a lot of the South, even if we don't think about it specifically in those ways, like the specific framings, like the distinctions and the change of like rhetoric, thinking about like soul food or Southern cuisine or I don't know, another classification.
even the way you call those things, soul food, Southern cuisine, they're like, even rhetorically, like two different things. They sound different. They would trigger different things when you think about it. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, you're right. You're at a place where you can take advantage of those intersections and like celebrate those. Um, by being a part of these different communities. Um, yeah, I'm obviously from Georgia, so like, and this is for Fulton County. Um, so in Atlanta, which is now, well, I can't, it's a bit different now what Southernness means, but,
Right.
but
Right.
it's exciting how those work. Um, and then do you have, I guess the last question, for people who are looking to find their poetry tribe or their poetry community, how to start that process? So people who are writing don't have, but don't have people to share it with, don't have outlets for it. How should they start?
Yeah, I think um I guess if I were to boil it down, I could say, to think about like these identifications, right? These identifications that have like these networks out in the world, and then like I guess like reaching out based around those identifications. So like we're talking about Blackness
Mhm.
and Southernness, right? Seeking out organizations that take up those things and celebrate those things and put you in community with like-minded people. There are different ways that you can reach out as far as community, like researching what your aesthetics are in whatever it is the art that you're creating, and trying to find people who are like-minded. Social media is one of those tools that you can use sometimes to find it. I think even under all of that, like just trying to be earnestly yourself.
Yeah.
If you know how to do that, like I said, like I feel like I'm making a fool of myself on Twitter, but me making a fool of myself so earnestly by showcasing who I am has led me to find wonderful people. Like, and even if it's like a group of like 3 people,
Yeah.
or
Other,
are you gonna say something?
other but I think like people find your genuine like but yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to make fun of you. but
Yeah.
people would see your genuineness like and like inspired by that, like how I see it. Um but it's as simple as like reaching out, I guess, to like that you're easy to connect with on social media.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I think those are always such a treat when like, like you're putting yourself out earnestly, and maybe it's not like received um like astronomically by the masses, but like those people that you do find, you have like this like spiritual like comprehend or not comprehensive, but like kind of like soulful kind of like connection, right? And you
Yeah.
can build those relationships. And I think like establishing community and maintaining community, it takes a lot of work. But when you find those instances of people that you connect with in those ways, just hold on to them the best that you can. And that will lead to a really fulfilling kind of sense of community. And it will be good for your art to share it with people in the composition stages and beyond.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think like you said, like be yourself also feels like connect with people without expectation of like not in a networking sense, but in a way that you really want to share something um, helps too. Um, when you start there, I think that's a more sustainable relationship. Um, yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So I think that's all for me. How can people find you? Let's talk about that social media. What? How can people connect with you?
Right. So, I do all, I don't know, I don't want to say that I do all of the main ones, but yeah, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. All of my social media tags are just Dustin K. Pearson. Um, I have a website that people can uh, reach out to me via email. There's like a, I don't know, like a message box on my um, website, and I can respond to those messages as well. And I don't know, with the GIFs, I'm on, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Jiffy or Giphy. If you're interested in those, you can look me up on that website.
Okay, I didn't. That's what Jiffy's for.
Yeah, just like for hosting all of these different GIFs. Like you don't have to make them. You can just go and search out like GIFs that you can post anywhere on the internet. But yeah, you can use it as your online portfolio.
Hmm. Okay, and then I'll also plug your baby. So these will be for Fulton County. These will be available soon in the Fulton County Library System. So be on the lookout for those. And we will be back next week with another artist. And thank you so much, Dustin.
Thank you for
It's
having
been
me.
a pleasure. And
Yeah, definitely.
all right, Fulton,